Hi everyone, Yuki here. Welcome back to DZLBT02. As you may know, Ames is not here today, so I'm doing a channel takeover. In the spirit of Christmas, we'll be having a lot of lyrical deck profiles, so do stay tuned. Okay, so let's begin with everyone's favorite angel, Alestiel. We have the right deck. So this is the Grade 0 Alestiel. Let me position it a bit better. Here we go. Yep, that's your typical starter. When ruled upon, if you went second, draw 1. Okay, next, we have the Grade 1. So, with the recent balance updates, we actually needed to change a lot of the right deck because, well, previously there was actually room to experiment with the right deck, but now that Wings abilities require an Alestiel Vanguard, you actually do need to have your Alestiel right line. So, well, that's the end of early experimentation with other right lines. But the good news is, the trade-off is that we get a lot of very strong cards, so, well, look forward to them in the rest of the deck profile video. As usual, her skill is on place. You may check the top card. You may look at the top card. You take the top card of your deck and bind it. And then when you bind a card, it will give the ability white wings or black wings in terms of whether the card it bound is an odd grade or an even grade. So a quick refresher on black wings and white wings. These are skills that have an activation condition of the based on the grade of the bind zone cards in your bind zone. So if everything is odd, white wings are active. If everything is even, black wings are active. And 0 is an even number. Okay, so what this card essentially does is it sets up your bind zone such that the deck actually can function. So the white wing skill is when rolled upon, when you discard for your right deck, you would actually be able to soul blast 1 instead of discarding for the right deck, so that actually helps maintain card advantage. The black wing skill prevents opponents' grade 1 or lower rear guards from attacking you, so it prevents early rush and forces your opponent to commit grade 2s if they are on a grade 2 turn in order to swing into you. Next, moving on. Here is the grade 2 Vanguard. The grade 2 Vanguard says that when this unit is placed on the Vanguard circle, choose one card in your bind zone and put it at the bottom of your deck. If you bind the top card of your bind zone. So basically this resets your bind zone card, and it'll be important for you to take note of when you actually change the wings at this current point of time, which I'll go into a bit later because we actually do have cards that allow us to change the wing state in a very interesting way. So the Vanguard skill is Counterblast 1. During this turn, this unit gains a crit. It's a very basic skill, and sometimes we have to exercise judgment on whether to use the skill or not, because our Vanguard ability later on also uses a Counterblast, so you may end up Counterblast denying yourself if you actually use it too early. The second skill, however, on Black Wings is a continuous skill. When this unit attacks, right, for that battle, the opponent cannot call Guardians from hand to Guardian Circle if they are trigger units. So yeah, this prevents your opponent from guarding with trigger cards and basically force them to either cough up their other key pieces or just perfect guard it, which is extremely potent with the center crit if you actually manage to have both wings active at this point in time. You do have to note that they can actually intercept with their rear guard, so do keep that in mind. Last but not least, we have the Grade 3 Vanguard. So, Alestiel, the Grade 3 Alestiel, she has Dress Up. Dress Up basically means that she has the same name as the original Vanguard, the original Grade 3 Alestiel, as I'll show here when the fight begins. So yes, you can run all 8 copies total, and they will actually count as the same name only when the battle begins. Yeah. Only when the whole fight begins. So yeah, during the start of your main phase, choose one card from your bind zone and add it to hand and bind the top card of your deck. So the difference between this and the previous Alestiel is that you actually can bind without a card in bind. So it allows you to get out of very sticky situations previously we couldn't get out of with Shoujo Doji. So let's take a look at the Blackwing skill. The Blackwing skill is more of a consistency skill that allows you to discard a card from your hand as the cost in order to search for a Blackwing card from your deck and call it to rearguard circle and shuffle your deck. And this actually combos very nicely with one of the newer cards, as you will see, although sometimes you may choose to directly tutor out certain cards as the situation calls for it. One very useful tip to remember is that this actually can tutor out personal copies if you have an MIL to bounce the card. So I'll talk more about that later. And the White Wing skill, as some of you may be familiar with Alestiel's origins, she came from Cattle Sanctuary, and one of the very famous rewrite decks in Cattle Sanctuary is Youthberg. So let's talk about it. At the end of the battle this unit attacks, you may counterblast one, discard one from hand, from your deck or hand, search a card with the name of base Alestiel, which is this card, write it as stand, and during the turn, gain drive -1, and if you search from the deck, shuffle your deck. So basically, what this allows you to do is to have an additional Vanguard attack and an additional drive. So it's a really strong effect, even though it requires you to have a counter blast, discard one, and also be in White Wings. So, as you may realize, right, the Vanguard actually has 2 discard abilities, which will be important to take note of when we are talking about other cards later on. So, that concludes our right deck. Let's move on to the main deck. So, for our grade 3s, we have 3 copies of the new form of Alestiel. You actually do need to rewrite the new form of Alestiel because unlike Youthberg, she does not rewrite herself. Yes. So moving on, we have 3 copies of base Alestiel. Actually, you can opt to run 4, or in some extreme cases, I've even seen people run 2. 3, I feel, is a very safe spot because it allows you to have enough consistency while also having space to put other payoff cards in your deck. And for the last of our grade 3s, we have 2 Alkel. Now some of you might be wondering, why 2? Didn't we always used to run this card as a 4th? Well, this card is just more for the random chance, right? That when she's bound, right, she will actually activate both of your Black Wings and White Wings abilities until the end of your opponent's next turn, which means it enables your offensive abilities during your turn and your defensive abilities during your opponent's turn. And it also has the skill that when your Vanguard is placed, you may bind this card and draw 1, which forcefully activates this skill. However, it's really not recommended, as if you have more than 1 card in bind, as what I mentioned earlier, the condition of Black Wings and White Wings may not be active, as they require you to have only even or odd cards for either to be active. So if you commit to this, which you should not, given that we have new cards in this set that actually help us to achieve this condition, you have a very difficult time getting yourself out of the situation. So please be very careful with this. Yeah. Let's move on to our grade 2s. So for grade 2s, we play the Lyrical Ace unit. So why the Lyrical Ace unit? For starters, we don't really have a lot of energy users in this deck. We actually only have a total of 4 in-archetype cards that actually use energy, which we'll talk about later on. And this is another way for us to ensure that, our energy is being used on curve. So what this Lyrical Ace unit does is, when this unit is placed other than on the battle phase, during this turn, this unit gains 5. If you EV3, you may draw one and choose another rearguard. During that turn, this chosen unit gets. During the end of your turn, you may return that chosen unit to hand. So it allows you to really just search out a persona copy and bounce it back to hand for the next set up for the next turn. Or let's say you have other key cards that you intend to continue using, you may also use that to just protect your pieces. It also has another offensive skill that when it attacks a grade 3 or greater opponent's Vanguard, when it attacks, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit gains 5. So during this turn, if there are 2 or more of your rearguards placed, this unit gains 5 more. So if you can get all 3 skills off in the same turn, it's actually a 25k attacker, which is really strong. So just keep that in mind. Okay, lyrical ace unit aside, let's talk about our in-archetype cards. As some of you may be very aware, we've gotten a really strong new card called Lyrical. So, Lyrica's skill is, when she's placed on the rearguard circle, if your Vanguard is a Alestiel, you may Energy Blast 3, check the top 5 cards of your deck, and choose a unit with a different name from this card with a Black Wing or White Wing ability, and add it to hand. And you shuffle the deck afterwards. So this is our energy user for the deck, and it's very reminiscent of a lot of cards, such as a lot of very strong cards, such as the infamous Tefo or Shenri. But instead of paying a Soul Blast, you're paying energy, and you can find cards with Black Wing or White Wing, which, if you are very observant, it doesn't specify the grade of the card, so you actually can find a persona copy on as early as turn 2. However, do take note that Alestiel does not have a wings related skill, because while she does activate the conditions, she herself does not possess a skill, so she's not a valid search target. So do keep that in mind. The second skill, which is a Black Wing skill, yes, is a continuous that during the battle this unit attacks, all of your opponent's guardians gain minus 5k. So what does this mean? It means that they cannot guard with any grade 1 or grade 2 that does not gain shield, because they're all 5k shield, and if you guard with them, they become 0k shield. So yeah, they're forced to guard using triggers, or for example, there's a very famous deck in Brandgate that has rearguards that gain shield. For example, Obscudate. So when they guard with the Obscudate, it's now only 5k shield instead of 10k shield. So do keep that in mind. This card is very good for early rush, as you notice that this condition does not have when your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or higher. So sometimes if you're just aiming for that early rush, you can just put the card down, go +1, and also swing your opponent for shield value. So this card is really good, and is one of the key targets for Alestiel's Black Wing Search, because it allows you to basically have a guaranteed way to use your energy while you toolbox for your other cards. But sometimes you may need the specific card more than you need the card advantage, so be very careful with whether you decide to use Lyrical now or you really need that particular card more. So another returning favorite is Fanael. So Fanael's skill is, when she's placed, if you have a Alestiel Vanguard, you may Soul Blast 1, choose a card in your bind zone, add it to hand, and you may bind another card if you add it. So what this does is allow you to toolbox the card in your bind zone, and also just put a way for you to put Alestiel in the bind zone without affecting the number of cards in your bind zone. However, she has been cut down from 3, from the usual 4 to 3, because we have other means of actually protecting our bind zone. So her second skill is, when this unit attacks a Vanguard, counterblast 1. If you have a grade 3 and above opponent's Vanguard, you may minus 5,000 to it. So this is one of the issues I was talking about with the earlier Alestiel support. A lot of the effects are gated behind your opponent's Vanguard being grade 3 or greater. So sometimes you may want to use the counter blast for other things, such as your Vanguard skill, or yeah, just your Vanguard skill for this particular build of the deck. There are other cards such as Alestiel, which may be used for their counter blast to add to hand and bind a card from the top deck to gain plussing, but it's a bit risky, so generally speaking, we try to avoid using counter blast skills except for that of the Vanguard. Yep. Moving on, another returning favorite, we have MIL. MIL is previously what I said is one of the strongest cards in the Alestiel deck. Now she's still quite strong, but not exactly the strongest. Her skill is for Black Wings. When she is boosted, and at the end of the battle, she's boosted, you may choose one of either your rear guards or your soul and add it to hand. And if you added a card from soul, you may put her to soul. She's one of the main ways for you to loop your persona copies, or even just protect your board. For example, key units like Lucidia, right? If you actually can bounce her instead of having to always search her out to use the energy, you can now use the search to find something better instead. Like if you have a specific target that will have offensive capabilities, now you can search that without worrying about whether you have the Lucidia. Do remember that she needs a booster, so she conflicts a lot with other cards like PRL, which is not included in this deck build because PRL does not gain power herself, and she requires a source of minus power from either Alestiel or Fenile or Baruel in order to function. So she can make sequencing very awkward and also compete with bot slots for the back row, which reduces the amount of boosters we actually can realistically run for MIL. And MIL is also just a overall good rush card because you can just call her down, put a booster behind her, and then just bounce the booster back with very little changes to your defenses. So yeah, that concludes our grade 2s. Now moving on to our grade 1s, the moment you have all been waiting for. Here's Alestiel, the true savior of the deck this set. Yes. Okay, so during your turn, if this card is discarded from your hand, if your Vanguard is an Alestiel, put one card from your bind zone to the drop and bind this card until your opponent's next turn. This card activates all of your white and black wing abilities. So what does this mean? It means that for your right deck, for all of your right ups, yes, you actually can just discard this card and just consistently activate the white wings or black wings ability for every single turn. However, you have to be very mindful when you are discarding it for the grade 1 right up to grade 0 to grade 1 right up, because when you discard it, it ends up in the bind zone. When you write the grade 2 Alestiel, it will go to the bottom of the deck. Okay. So be very mindful with that. And another interaction that you also need to remember is that at the start of your main phase, you add the card back to hand from bind and you buy a new card. So when you discard when riding up from the grade 2 to the grade 3, you actually have the choice of whether you want to rebind a new card and bind. Sorry, when you discard from when you're riding up from grade 2 to grade 3, Alestiel goes to the bind zone because you are still in the right phase. When you go to the main phase, you add her back and you buy a new card. So do remember the timing of this interaction and really declare all of your phases very carefully. Another interaction to remember is for Fenial. When you call Fenial off of Alestiel's skill, both of them go into standby. So you can either drop the card in your bind Alestiel, and then get Fenial to swap her out with a card in your hand, or you can do the opposite and have Alestiel in bind and the card in bind in your hand, and just get rid of a card that was originally in your hand. So all of this sequencing actually matters if you really need a specific card to be in your hand at a particular point of time. So yeah, you really need to see this card, and if you don't see her, you need to find a way to see her, and that's where Lucidiel actually is very crucial in finding the card. It's actually it's potentially game losing if you do not see this card, so please mulligan for this thing. Yes. Last but not least, sorry, we actually have a lot more cards. We do a little bit of trolling here. Anyways, Seraphiel. She's rewrite support. What can I say? When you call her, you put a card with Alestiel in its name from your drop to the bottom of your deck. Grade 3s, by the way, only grade 3s. And her White Wing skill, during the battle phase, if your Alestiel Vanguard is placed on the Vanguard circle, stand this card. So, this card, yes, it restands. So you can actually put the trigger power behind your Vanguard to actually continue pressuring for more damage. This was actually used in other pretty degenerate combos where you just discarded a Justine on the side column and you actually gave it an extra attack, but the numbers for that are pretty bad and it's a very janky combo, so we are not running that in this build. Okay. Now, last but not least, in terms of one of the actual rear guards in this set, a returning favorite of mine, Maribuel. Her skill is very simple. During your turn, if you are in White Wings, this unit just gains 10k power, which makes it a 15k beater, which is very good. When you're going second, you can just swing for 15. When you're going first, you can also just boost it. You can boost a lot of things and just give it very huge power. One of the very toxic ways to use this card is to just boost the Lucidiel. That is like 25 power and they minus shield. Very strong. Both are very good cards to call early on, and if they survive long enough on the field, they actually can just easily 0 to 3 or even 0 to 5 your opponent even before you hit your grade 3 turn. So yeah, with how fast the format is getting, yes. Now we have 4 perfect guards. Why are they this art? Personal preference. Or you can just tell your opponent you are playing Chris Rain, they'll believe you. And as for our triggers, we play 4 heals, 3 draws, 3 effect draws, 1 Eidos Pharaoh, and 8 crit. I love Yukina from Rosalia. Okay, so the reason we play crits is because this deck has extra drive and crits good. Just check yellow and win. We play Eidos Pharaoh because it's also a crit and it allows you to add a unit from drop, a card from drop to your hand. So that can be your Persona Right or Perfect Guard that increases your survivability or offensive capabilities. We are not running any recursion in this deck because all the recursion in archetype is actually costed in terms of counterblast. So yeah, this is our main costless recursion. Can you say it's costless if she puts herself to soul? I don't know. Okay. You actually have a decision between whether you want to run draws or runs with this deck. We are running draws, right? So we have more flexibility with our sequencing. yep, that concludes our trigger section. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed this deck profile, and see you in the next deck profile. Bye bye.